Good morning, members. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If I can get everyone to sit in their chair, please, that would be wonderful. All right, members, declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Are there any? Seeing none, thank you. I'd like to move a confirmation of the minutes from the September 18th meeting. Councillor Carroll, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We have a number of speakers, presentation, communications, report. We've got a number of communication items. Yeah, thanks. All right, moving right along, members. ED 7.1, Toronto Arts Council 2014 allocations report. What say you, members of the committee? I saw Claire here. It says action. It doesn't say presentation. Ms. Claire, will you wish to speak? Yes. Okay, so I will hold that item. Thank you. Thank you, Claire. Okay, ED 7.2. That is the revisions to the major cultural organizations grant program.
I walked in the door with a question, but now it's answered.
It's been answered. Okay, so shall we move that? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. ED 7.3, appointment of 5th City of Toronto's Poet Laureate. I'm just going to hold that for a moment, Madam Clerk, if you will, and then we'll come back to that. ED 7.4, this is the University of Toronto's presentation. I see Mr. Kidd, Ms. Wilson's here, and I'm looking forward to the presentation. Mr. Mulberry is here. Mayberry is here as well. Pardon? Scott Mayberry is here. Vice President, University Operations. I will hold that item. Okay. ED 7.5, State of Toronto Business Improvement Area was the presentation. I saw Mr. Carew and Mr. Miskins here as well, so I will hold that down. ED 7.6, intention to designate the proposed City Place and Fort York Business Improvement Area. It's it's designate. Yeah, it's it. Okay. So council.
Change our minds after the presentation.
Okay, I can reopen it then if you move it now and close it. What say you, Councillor Crisanti? You'd like to move that? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. All right. ED 7.7, programs to promote economic revitalization in distress relief areas. I'm going to hold that then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. No end. Thank you, councillors. All right. We have ED 7.8, Music Strategy Report, Public Consultation. Who'd like to move that? Councillor Fracadakis, would you like to move that? That's why I ask you. That's great. So thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We're looking forward to the public consultation in order to develop our music strategy. Okay. ED 7.9, Economic Dashboard. Any questions? Seeing none? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Members?
Hold that next month after the election.
Okay, Councillor Carroll. All right, so members, moving right along, we would go back normally to ED 7.1. I'm going to ask that we vary the agenda in order to deal with ED 7.3, which is the appointment of the 5th City of Toronto's Poet Laureate. I have been advised by the clerk that I have to read something, and just before I do that, though, Madam Clerk, I will also like to remind everyone that today's meeting obviously is available online. So for those who are watching on television, watching online or on TV, you can also follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablets, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. We have only 9 items on the agenda today. This is one of the rare meetings where we have a very small agenda, and I see a lot of smiles because I know that there are a number of hard stops in terms of activities that people have to attend to today. Also want to remind everyone that we actually have the screen at the back of the room that provides real-time updates for the agenda items and so on. So that's a little bit of housekeeping that I wanted to get out of the way. All right, so moving back to ED 7.3, and I just want to make sure I have quorum. Councilor Carroll? Oh, yes, he is in the room. Okay. I'm going to move that City Council appoints the selected individual named in the attached item 1 to the position of Poet Laureate for the City of Toronto for a 3-year term beginning December 1st, 2015 until November 30th, 2018, or until a successor is appointed. And so there's a great deal of suspense relating to the appointment of the new Poet Laureate. And before I mention the name of the new Poet Laureate that is in front of us today, I want to also acknowledge that Mr. and Dr. George Elliott Clark, our current Poet Laureate, who is the 4th Poet Laureate for the City of Toronto, is with us and will continue to be the Poet Laureate until such time that the new Poet Laureate will assume that position. And of course, I didn't say him or her, I just said that position. And as I said earlier in my remarks, that the new Poet Laureate will assume the position effective December 1st, 2015, running to November 30th, 2018. So Council will essentially, by consent agenda, ratify our decision that this committee will be making. And it's an unusual one because normally we would forward the name to Council under confidential item, which is looks like this page. But we are today doing things a little bit differently. So I am, Madam Clerk, if I am so permitted to do, I am very pleased, members of committee and members of the public, to introduce the incoming Poet Laureate for the great City of Toronto, none other than Miss Anne Michaels. Anne, would you please stand? Thank you. Ms. Michaels was born in Toronto. She's an author of 5 acclaimed poetry collections, and I would also suggest to you that she is also an internationally acclaimed writer. The Fugitive Peace, a novel penned by her in 1996, as one, and in fact it's internationally acclaimed, was the winner of the Toronto Book Award. And so we have another esteemed incoming Poet Laureate to the position. So I'm just so very pleased as I see Mr. Clark putting his arm around her, welcoming her to the Society of Poets Laureate for the City of Toronto. So, and they're both smiling so well. So I'm so very happy to see. Members, I'd also like to say. Okay, that the mayor is looking forward to welcoming both Mr. Clark and Ms. Michaels to his office for a meeting where we'll be going to visit the mayor at about 10 o'clock. So Councillor Kelly, I saw him come in, so he's here. He will assume the chair for me while I escort the, not just yet at 10 o'clock, we'll escort the 2 esteemed poets to see the mayor. So thank you very much, and again, congratulations, Ms. Michaels. Okay. So members, the motion that we actually have on the screen, all those, sorry? Oh, absolutely. So Yes, Councillor Frакadakis wishes to speak.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the fourth Poet Laureate for the City of Toronto for a fantastic job over these last 3 years. He's not really leaving the city, and he's promised me that he will continue to crash if he's not invited to the East End Poetry Festival, and we look forward to that. He's been a real inspiration to a lot of young people in this city, and I look forward to working with him on a fantastic poetry project at the Chester Station.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you. And Councillor, I just wanted to add, which I was going to add, certainly, as you know, I've coined a pet name for Mr. Clark, and that's Sweet Mouth, because he has sweet mouth, as has been said by a number of my constituents about me, and I take that as a compliment, and I know he does as well. He has been absolutely outstanding as the Poet Laureate for the City of Toronto, and I look forward to his continuance for the next month or so with respect to the outstanding work that he has done on behalf of certainly all of the residents of Toronto and Council, and clearly looking forward to Ms. Michael's continuation or continuing of the outstanding utilization of words and language to express feelings of joy, sorrow, and just happiness. And I look forward to National Poetry Month, when we also welcome you to the Chamber of Council, where you will give us a rendition of the poem that you will select for National Poetry Month. So on behalf of members of the committee, we are so very delighted to have you both. So thank you very much. Okay. All right, so members, the motion's on the screen. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. All right. So we are now moving to item 87.1. And it's the Toronto Arts Council. This was a deferred item from September. And Claire, you're here? Good morning. Morning to you all.
Good morning. Good
Can you
morning.
introduce everyone, please?
May I do that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you may.
And Chairman Thompson and members of the committee, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to present TAC's 21014 grants report to you today. For those who don't know me, I'm John McKellar. I'm the chair of the Toronto Arts Council, and I am joined today by our president, Nova Bhattacharya. Whoops, wrong side, here you are. And director and CEO, Claire Hopkinson. It's been my pleasure to be chair of TAC's board for the last 7 years. And with the support of this committee and Toronto City Council, we've been able to offer significantly increased support to our city's arts sector, particularly in the last 2 years. The report before you provides details of the 2,283 grant applications made to TAC in 2014, requesting a total of almost $30 million in support. Following many hours of adjudication by our team of incredibly dedicated volunteer artists and workers, as well as scores of hard-working jurors, our board approved and dispersed almost 1,988 grants, totaling just over $16 million to organizations and artists across the city last year. You see before you a comprehensive list of these allocations, clearly illustrating the wealth of experience and opportunity brought to the city last year. I would now like to turn to Claire, who will provide some more detail about the impact of the city's increased arts funding in Toronto. Claire?
Thank you, John. I'm on. I just want to say on a personal note, I wanted to mention that my esteemed chair, John McKellar, has also served on arts boards for more than 50 years and really deserves a great vote of thanks from the arts community for sure. And thank you,
He's a
Councillor.
famous actor guest starring in the Toronto-made series Sensitive Skin.
Nominated for an international Emmy, and I have fully 3 words. All at once, too.
Well, thank you, Councillor Thompson, and this committee for hearing our presentation today. So as you know, 12 years ago, City Council set a goal to reach an arts funding target of $25 per capita. This was first set with the Culture Plan in 2003 and reaffirmed in 2011 with Creative Capital Gains Report. And it's wonderful that City Council continues this commitment to reach this goal by 2017. As you can see by this slide, a direct result of Council's commitment, TAC's grants program has received new funding. From 2012 to 2014, our grants budget grew from just about $10 million to a little bit over $16 million. These significant funding increases presented TAC with and our board with a fantastic challenge of requiring a well-thought-out, supported plan to spend the new dollars quickly and effectively. We met this challenge by approving priorities for new funding document up there, balancing both the city's priorities and the arts community's needs. So the priorities for new funding document highlights three main granting priorities. The first priorities we called growth and sustainability. It's catch up, keep up. The goals are to increase core funding to arts organizations, to increase project funding in all disciplines to smaller arts organizations and to individual artists. As you can see from this colorful chart, we've made good progress towards this goal. 2012 is in blue, 2013 is in yellow, 2014 is in green. So this means that our grants to individual artists have increased from 1.2 million to almost 2 million. Grants to projects have increased from 1.2 million to 1.7 million. And our grants to operating organizations have increased from almost 8 million to 10 million. Our second priority for new funding is called Community Connections, and this fits in perfectly with our vision, Creative City Block by Block, which is to increase access to the arts to all neighborhoods across the city. The goals of this priority are specifically to support youth-led arts projects, community engagement arts projects, particularly in the inner suburbs, culturally diverse youth arts and arts organizations, and also partnerships with Toronto's civic institutions so that we can increase this access across the city, even in areas where there are no purpose-built arts facilities. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of the programs brought forward under this priority that I think you'd like to know about. Artreach Toronto, youth-led projects. We're supporting 63 projects now in 14 wards across the city. Artists in the Schools, this is partnership with Toronto District School Board and Prologue with Performing Arts. This is served 10,000 students in the first 2 years and has provided programming to in 22 wards, 19 of which are outside the downtown core. A new music creation and auto recording program. I know the music office's ears are going up right now. It's very exciting. We put $200,000 into this program. Really, as we had so many applications from young artists all over the city. In fact, we had applications in the amount of 1.7 million within 2 years. Quite incredible. Then we have this excellent program in partnership with the Toronto Public Library, and we're in branches Cedar Brae, Downsview, Fairview, Mimico, Oakwood Village, and now we've expanded to 9 libraries in 2015. This program is doing wonderful things. Another program very close to my heart is animating historic sites and museums, and I see Larry Ostola here. This is a wonderful relationship. We've awarded 16 grants in the first 2 years, creating site-specific projects at the Gibson House, Montgomery's Inn, Scarborough Museum, Zion Schoolhouse, Todmorden Mills, and also the Royal Ontario Museum. And I was speaking with Larry at Nuit Blanche opening, and he was extremely enthusiastic about the latest project opened at the Zion Schoolhouse. So this is bringing in new audiences to the arts organizations, new audiences to the museums, and these artists and the curators are having a very important and interesting relationship. Our third priority innovation and partnerships. These are the goals to respond to one-time exceptional events and opportunities, such as the Pan Am Games. We want to build local arts community capacity. We're facilitating mentorship and professional development opportunities, and we're stimulating investment, increased investment from other levels of government, in particular in Toronto arts scene. We could not have done this in the past without this new funding. So a few of the programs under this priority are open door funding. So this is a non-discipline specific envelope, and we're just really inviting the best big ideas that the city's artists and arts organizations bring to us. And just two highlights would be that we funded under this program Bloor Street Cultural Corridor app, many of you know that project, and then just recently, Fall for Dance, which is promoting contemporary dance in Toronto. It was sold out, 9,000 people plus at the Sony Centre for 3 nights. The cheers just resonated all over the Sony Centre. It was a fantastic program. Platform A is very grassroots. Community arts organizations working in collaboration to deliver micro-grants across the city, indeed 20 wards across the city, and our micro-grants grew to 55 in 2014. Now, a program that is going to be very dear to your hearts is Arts Fest. This is a sponsorship training program, matching incentive program with matching funding from the federal government from Canadian Heritage. So in 2013 and 2014, Toronto Arts Council invested $500,000 matched by the federal government. 148 arts organizations participated in this program. They partnered with 200 local businesses and raised over $2 million in sponsorship funds on top of initial investment. So that is bang for your buck. And then, of course, many of you met the fellows from our Toronto Arts Council Cultural Leaders Lab. We brought them into City Hall last week. They had a very informative time, thanks to the staff here and to the mayor for introducing them. So this is a partnership program with Banff, and they are contributing $150,000 to this leadership program. Yay! So these past few slides have just offered a few highlights of the new programs we've developed. And now I'd like to draw your attention to the impact some of these programs are having. And I just want to note that the funds were delivered in April 2013 for projects that were happening in 2014. So we're just beginning to receive the results back from these 2014 projects. So I'm just saying this is early days. These are early metrics. And we'll be happy to report on later metrics. So this slide here, early impact of funding increases on the Toronto Arts Council. So these are arts organizations that we fund, generally speaking, year after year. They are the strongest. They are the most successful arts organizations in the city. And over the past 2 years, Toronto Arts Council has been able to increase to 215 arts organizations an additional $2 million. That is the blue square. In the same period, the organizations have leveraged increased support to raise an additional $3.6 million in private sector fundraising, and that is the yellow square, and then $4.4 million in ticket sales. So the total impact in just 2 years is $10 million in revenues because of this $2 million increase. In other metrics, we've been able to significantly increase our support to projects conceived of and implemented by youth. This was a big priority we've heard. And we were not able to do this before, but since 2014, you can see that we have supported 89 youth-led projects as opposed to 1 in the first year. Likewise, the success rate for artists applying for funding for the first time has really risen dramatically. In total, successful first-time artists.
Sorry, no idea.
It's okay. It's dramatic. Okay. They've increased from 54 in 2012 to 352 successful applicants. in 2014, demonstrating a significant increase in access to funding. And finally, this chart demonstrates the power of your increased investment in the arts. News of this additional funding has really inspired and activated and catalyzed the arts community. Many were inspired to develop new projects, particularly as I've demonstrated through Open Door, and great ideas. So previously they may have felt unsupported or discouraged, and now they are really starting to come to us with brilliant, strong proposals. So in just 2 years, and you'll see the 2012 chart, which is in blue, the dark is the money we were able to distribute, and the light blue is the applications. So we have grown from $17 million in applications to now 30, and we've been able to disperse $10 million to $16 million. And we expect this to grow as the arts community is growing. And as I say, I have to reiterate, the applications are extremely strong. So, on a different topic now, I'd like to move over to the Toronto Arts Council staffing and operations side, and how we've made use of our increased resources, which went up from a grant of $1.2 million to now, in 2014, $1.6 million. Since these new grants program, the new funding was introduced, we have implemented 13 new programs, grants programs. We have adjudicated 750 new applications, and we have granted and evaluated some 300 new grants. And this was despite our very lean operations. I think we're still the leanest arts council in North America. And we met these challenges. We really stepped up to the opportunity. We were inspired by the new funding. But also it was partly possible because of these new partnerships we've developed with to share adjudication and evaluation and program costs with partners, which you can see here. And I do want to point out that in addition to what the Toronto Arts Council is doing, the Toronto Arts Foundation is raising money from the private sector, and it's investing approximately $500,000 private dollars annually into arts research, into networking, connecting artists to communities all over the city, and also helping with mentorship and workshops. So this further leverages Toronto Arts Council's operation funding. What we were also able to do during this period was introduce an online grants program. Cheers have gone up from the arts community. This makes it much simpler for them. They don't have to race to our offices at 5 o'clock to drop off their grant applications in snowstorms. But it's also allowed us to collect much more robust data. We can do mapping. We can tabulate grants by wards now. It's now launched, and all of our grants are now fully online. This was a very big project, and kudos to the team who put it together. We've also redeveloped our website, so our grants officers have increased their outreach to all corners of the city, taking up many invitations from councillors to talk to constituents, but the website really supports that. We are able to offer online tutorials, webinars on our website. It's very user-friendly, but also it links directly to the artist's stories and to their website. So for any grant that we issue, you can now go and actually connect with that organization and see what they're doing. Toronto Arts Online, our improved event mapping site, allows Torontonians to actually see what events are in their neighborhood by price, by type of work. And this is really what we're all about, which is connecting artists to residents of Toronto and to audiences. So now, I'm going to leave you with a few quotes and comments from partners, grant recipients, and audiences on your last slide, and turn you over to Nova Bhattacharya, our esteemed president of the board.
Thank you. Claire has given you a snapshot of the incredible accomplishments and effects of new investment at Toronto Arts Council. It's an exciting time to be an artist in this city, but we are well aware that we are just getting started. In 2003, you set a $25 per capita arts funding goal so that we could catch up to Montreal's level. And we're on track to reach that goal, but in the meantime, Montreal's per capita funding has grown to $55, and Toronto today is outspent by all major Canadian and many US centers. So yes, TAC has been able to create programs and extend arts access to the city and to reduce some of the more significant gaps in our funding, but we have not been able to come close to the investment levels required to meet identified needs and invigorate our arts organizations so that the city can reach its full potential. The problem of low levels of investment is compounded by other challenges affecting Toronto today. Affordable housing, reliable transit, available daycare are as integral for artists as they are for anyone else. If we look to TAC's operating companies, those organizations that are the most stable, they are just not close enough to meeting the city's living wage standard when it comes to paying artists. Collectively, these organizations would need an additional $6 million a year to meet this standard. So basically, Toronto's artists are subsidizing a sector that contributes $11.9 billion annually to Toronto's GDP. I know that my fellow artists are deeply committed to this city. We need to formulate a plan that celebrates that commitment and encourages us and makes it possible for us to stay here instead of being tempted by other cities who are putting arts at the forefront of city building. We therefore extend the challenge to you, Economic Development Committee and City Council. Going forward, Toronto needs a new investment plan for its arts sector, a plan that will put Toronto on equal footing with comparable Canadian and US cities, a plan that will put Toronto ahead of comparable Canadian and US cities. At TAC, we are developing a strategic plan to create a vision for our future, and we so look forward to our continued partnership with the city as we work to make Toronto a hub for creativity and forward thinking.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none? Councillor Frакadakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you have many exciting projects going, and it's great to see the strategic plan behind it all. I'd like to know more about the open door funding. It sounds actually very interesting. I was wondering how would those projects come forward, and what kind of criteria are used to allocate funding? And that's to Claire.
Oh, thank you. Well, we've had 2 rounds one year and 1 round another year. Essentially, we've told the arts community that they can come to us with ideas that are under the following 3 areas: market development, innovation and new models, and, sorry, just 1 second. What's the 3rd area? And, well, yes, except just responding to exceptional opportunities. So particularly, we've had a lot of applications under market development because Toronto Arts Council currently does not have a touring budget or a touring program or a market development program. One of the early applications was to take 6 dance companies to Montreal to Sonars under the tutelage of Harbourfront. And Tina Rasmussen introduced these companies personally to all of her contacts. So this was very, this was a really important introduction for these very small companies to meet some of the largest producers in the world. So these are the kind of exceptional opportunities. We can't tell the organizations what they're going to be. We're going to listen to them and respond and see what comes up. But so far, it's been a very interesting multidisciplinary jury, which and we think some of these projects are going to point the way to the Toronto Arts Council and to others for the kinds of programs that are needed to support the arts in Toronto. It's really listening to the leading edge.
Okay. Also, I like the sounds of the microgrants, and I think that gives you flexibility to also respond to interesting opportunities. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Delighted to. So this is Arts Starts, Arts for Children and Youth, Sketch, and Jumbalees Theatre for very distinguished community arts organizations. They work in very different ways, but they've collaborated together under a thing called Platform A. And because they're so close to the ground, they're so close in their communities, they've been able to pinpoint young, emerging artists, but also community people who may not have thought of themselves as one of the big name artists. So they've been able to actually deliver to our board recommendations for small grants up to $1,000 to get started, to get some project in their community working. And so far, you know, this collaboration has had other impacts, which is sharing best practices, sharing resources. So it's had other outcomes as well.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, first of all, for a terrific presentation.
Thank you.
Last year, you and I lunched with the then president of the Toronto Board of Trade, and I'm just wondering if, given your very busy schedule and that of your staff, if there's been any opportunity to pursue that this year.
Well, with the new president, we did meet around the Expo Working Group table, and we've exchanged cards and promised to have another lunch. But I've also met with Gillian Smith, the new VP of Membership, and we've decided to do some partnership, which is now in a formulation, you know, early stages. But thank you for that.
Yesterday afternoon, I had the pleasure of touring DMZ, the entrepreneurial initiative at Ryerson University. And talk about creativity bubbling and snapping. It certainly is evident there. And I'm wondering, because arts plays many roles in contemporary society, and the more dynamic cities, and the best example, I guess, is New York City. And I keep asking people if they've read The Warhol Effect. Because they have learned how to monetize their arts. And I'm wondering if you've had any opportunity to open discussions with people that are leading the DMZ operation.
Well, we have some partnerships with Ryerson, and we're looking very, you know, with great interest on what they're doing, and some of the other academic institutions as well, particularly partnering with them through the Toronto Arts Foundation. And last night I was at the a launch where Artscape is going to be launching Launchpad. So this is going to be another opportunity for artists once they graduate from these universities to find a place to try out new skills in a convivial environment, at the same time as applying for grants, but at the same time learning how perhaps to be entrepreneurial. Some of the workshops we do through the Neighborhood Arts Network are really about making a living, making an art. So the whole, you know, our arts community is very resilient in the sense of it's less than a third of public support goes into supporting these organizations. It's a lot of income to make up. Many of them are doing experimental new work. And they're looking and finding ways to make friends, to sell their work, to sell T-shirts, to monetize what they do. I would say that the arts community is extremely entrepreneurial and resilient. Unfortunately, they often don't make enough money.
Okay, that's it. 2 questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor, to speak, Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I only wanted to comment because I'm sitting back on the board again this year. It was kind of an interesting perspective because the last time I sat on the board was really just before the influx of funds started to make its impact, because I was there for the first half of the last term. Then in 2012, the billboard tax started to come in. And I really just wanted to, like Councillor Kelly, thank the Arts Council for laying it out so well in both in the report and in the presentation visually. It should come as no surprise that they're good at visually showing us the impact. But I just wanted to say that I also had the experience recently of describing how it works in a community that's gone from, I was just recently on a conference for transit reasons to San Francisco, and I got on the ferry and went to Vallejo to talk to them. Through participatory budgeting, they're starting to funnel some money into the arts, into a little town that was bankrupt just a few years ago. And so they're now sort of coming back. And they wanted to know about our art scene. And it was the first time in a long time I've had to describe it. And the model is the reason it is so much fun to describe. The way in which the Arts Council, a board that has, a president who's an actual peer and really understands the scene because she's in and of it, someone who has been in the governance end of it, Mr. McKellar, for so long in the city, and the staff, together did something we could not possibly have done so quickly and so nimbly. There's an influx of funds coming, so what are our gaps? From all of our peers' perspective, from council's perspective, from our perspective as the business unit, where do we want to fill in gaps? Where do we want to seed? Where do we want to go that we haven't been before? And all of it in a way that has created no hard feelings anywhere in the arts. They have total trust from the art scene. I can't think of anywhere else that happens. And had we decided we will figure out where we will put our new arts money in council, I'm certain that we would have made a complete mess of it and then cleaned it up again 5 years later. And so that in 2 years, such a difference was made, and so strategically and with really nimble decisions, and then just going forward. It shows in the bar graph and in the earnings that if you give them $2 million, an increase in their own ticket revenues. Never mind what they're pulling in from the business sector, but that they actually added $4.4 million to their own ticket revenues means this is not art that is just all happening on street corners for free. It's happening all through the scene. And really, they had to figure that out in about 2 budget years. And now I'm looking at it, looking in the 15 allocations. They really know exactly where it's going, all the new money as well. It's unprecedented, and I just want to thank them for it. It's a joy to sit on the board and see them do that work in such a record amount of time, considering the decision-making process they had to go through so quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Cho.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for excellent presentation. Over the years, Toronto has been one of the top 5 cities around the world, the best city to live and work. And I'd like to thank you for the arts community. You've been making great contribution to the quality of life at Toronto. I'm saying that from my own experience, I could compare. One of my son, he was doing PhD at the Cambridge some 15 years ago. And my wife and my 2 sons are driving all European countries, especially in France. It doesn't matter where I go, whether it's a big city or community or neighborhood. It's almost like stages everywhere, singing, dancing, so peaceful, and they love arts, It's happening right here in Toronto. I was in London, England that year, and there were 3 musical shows, Les Miserables, the Cats, and the Blood Brothers, and the tourists just everywhere. So dynamic, so exciting community there. It's happening right here in the city of Toronto. And you could get a lot of credits for your contributions. So I'd like to thank you so much. Keep up your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cho. Anyone else?
Yep, me.
Oh, Councillor Kelly. Apologies.
Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Well, Mr. Chair, we all know, certainly the members of this committee more than others, that the 21st century is going to be a century of competition, economic competition between urban regions. And it's very important for us to not only understand that, but to do our very best to create that economic powerhouse that will do us well in that very stiff competition that lies ahead. But we often neglect to understand, as Richard Florida does, that increasingly young men and women are choosing the city in which they want to reside before they choose the occupation or the company they're going to work for. And so in order to buttress the economy of this city going forward, to contribute significantly to its growth, you need a city that's culturally alive, that's dynamic, that entertains and informs, challenges. The MGM logo, you know, the roaring lion, had Latin arc that said arts, gratia, artis, art for the sake of art. Well, I don't think historically art has ever, although it can have that as its central purpose, art over the centuries has been asked to perform many tasks on behalf of the society in which it resides. And I'm just delighted when I talk to people from other countries about how dynamic this city is, not only economically, but technologically and artistically. And I think if you understand how the arts have become an integral part of life in the city, and increasingly more important as time goes on, then you'll respect and applaud the work that members of the Toronto Arts Council, the members of the committee, the staff, Claire, the chair, have made to the life of this city. So well done. Looking forward to a great 2016.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. I'm going to move receipt of the presentation, and I too wish to add my voice of not only gratitude, but also to suggest that without the arts, and ask the question, where would we be in a culturally diverse city? We would have none. And in fact, the very principles as to our efforts to sell this city internationally is predicated around culture. What is it that we have to offer? Our institutions, educational institutions, arts institutions, and so on, are fundamental to our existence, fundamental to our well-being. Challenge, yes, we are with respect to resources, but not deficient in terms of our recognition of the importance of the arts and cultural sector. We know and recognize and need to further bolster our efforts to ensure that there are sufficient resources that is directed to arts and culture. And clearly we have an organization with obviously the chair, Mr. McKellar, the executive director, CEO, and the chair of the Arts Council, the president of the Arts Council itself, who I've not really met much. I've seen you, and very nice to see you. Navda? Nova. Apologies. Nova, it's great to see you here and to hear you express your perspective and views, which I think members of this council and committee do share, and we recognize that more needs to be done. And dealing with the sort of principles of economics of scarce resources, we're trying to balance, and recognizing, though, the benefits that comes from the allocation of resources through the sector in terms of how it helps us to attract business, attract young visionaries and young people who are the lifeblood and energy to create that that wave and that movement that gives our city such vibrancy. And of course, with the stellar leadership of the ruling adult class, if I can use that expression, and how they have laid the foundation and continue to bring that collaborative approach to making things work and making things happen in order to get things down to the city. So I think that it's understood and it's recognized, and our challenge is to sort out how we will move forward. And I look at Claire, and you and I had an exchange many, many years ago where you helped me to understand the perspective of culture and arts in this city, and that has not been lost on me, and I think that you continue to do that with others to help them to understand and remove some of the blinders that people tend to wear. But clearly, the award that this city must and should bestow on the arts and cultural community has not been fully recognized yet, but I can tell you that when that award is fully recognized, it will be handed out to the arts and cultural community and through the leadership of the Toronto Arts Council in a way that will create that rippling effect that we actually want to see from the cultural sector and so on. John, your leadership has been expressed by Claire some 50 years, has been absolutely stellar, and your energy, your effervescence of how you transcend that to others and so on, it is contagious, and I hope that that continues and so on, and I know it will. So we do thank you, and clearly your message is not falling on deaf ears. We are obviously looking to see how we could transition through this process to be able to address some of the points that have been raised. But I think all of the people, the recipients of the grants and so on that has been conveyed are obviously thankful, and we as a city are thankful for the tremendous work that you do. So I'm going to, before we take the vote, I'm going to ask if there are any conflicts on this particular item. Okay, so I'll ask Councillor Cho just to leave the room for a moment, and we'll. So, did you wish to did you wish to express to members of the committee who have asked what the interest is?
Yeah, my interest is on page 35, Korean Canadian Symphony Orchestra. My wife is a board member of the board of directors, and the second item, Korean Dance Studies Society. She's the chair of the foundation.
Right, and I think you've declared that in the past, so I think we're consistent with that. Okay, so Councillor Cho is going for a walk, and while he goes for a walk, we will deal with the item. All those in favor of receiving the presentation? Okay, sure, Councillor, it's up to you. It's, no, I think we're fine, the clerk has indicated. Opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your remarks.
Nice day, thanks. All right, members, we're trying to have a hard stop at 11:30. All right, so I just want to remind members, we're now moving forward to our next item, which is ED 7.4. And members, we will have a presentation at 11:30, so I'd like to ask you to stay in the room and staff. All right, so moving right ahead.
This is the one that the local councillor, Councillor Cressy, would probably want to come back to the room.
If Councillor Cressy is in earshot and listening, if his office could ask him to come to the committee room. Okay, so we are ready. Ms. Wolfson, Mr. Mayberry, Mr. Kidd, are you ready? Okay, you have the floor, please. Just waiting till you get started. Let me know when you're ready. Are you all set?
My colleagues sit.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. I understand our councillor, Joe Cressy, will be, who's the councillor for Ward 20, will be coming shortly. So you have in front of you the materials. We're very pleased to be here. I have the privilege of serving as the Vice President of the University of Toronto responsible for international government and institutional relations. Joining me this morning are my colleagues, Professor Scott Mabry, the Vice President of University Operations, and Professor Bruce Kidd, I know many of you know, who's the Vice President and Principal of University of Toronto Scarborough. We were very pleased to have the opportunity to meet with Councillor Thompson and Mike Williams earlier this year, and who suggested that we come to the Economic Development Committee, and we're delighted to be here to present an overview of the University of Toronto. Not a vast overview at all. The University of Toronto, as you know, is situated right here in the heart of the City of Toronto and in Scarborough, where we are drivers of creativity and knowledge, indeed the arts, and drivers of economic growth. In the interest of time, I'm going to speak very quickly. You'll forgive me. Our presentation will be quick. We have a package for you of the materials with additional information, and we hope that after today, we'll be able to continue this engagement with you for any follow-up. So allow me to begin very quickly with a brief overview of the University of Toronto, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues who will go into a little more depth on two aspects. So what you have in front of you, to remind you, is we're pretty old. Since 1827, the University of Toronto has existed as an institution that creates knowledge. We transfer that knowledge. We contribute to the city, the economy, and the broader community. And you have in front of you some of the stats of not quite yet, some of the stats of the university, and you can see this is an extraordinary large enterprise. Here you can see how the University of Toronto ranks domestically and, next slide, internationally. And indeed, we are the only Canadian institution in the top 25 universities in the world. We are truly a center of research excellence and talent creation. So, what's our business? Our business, as I said, is to create knowledge, develop talent, and prepare students for lifelong careers. Before graduation, students have opportunities through work-integrated learning to enhance the quality of their post-secondary experience, to improve their learning outcomes, while also improving their employment prospects. In fact, one innovation at the University of Toronto is that students now are given a supplemental transcript, in addition to their grades, of their contributions in communities and at the university, and to help them bridge to employment. And in fact, this has been a really important piece of information for them as they go out into their place in communities in the world. As you can see from this slide, the impact of the University of Toronto students begins long before graduation. Just as I was saying, it creates an important partnership between the university and the city. But for these people, you got some of the slides here, but for these people, over 15,500 patients would not be seen annually at the Faculty of Dentistry Clinic. More than 70% of those patients have incomes of less than $30,000 a year. But for these students, over 700 clients would not be seen at University of Toronto legal clinics. But for these students, as you can see here, health centers, health services are delivered to hundreds of patients who unfortunately get lost in the system. Now, before I turn it over to my colleagues, Scott and Bruce, I want to share with you something that President Merrick Gertler is on the record as saying over and over again, and that is that he has made it a priority for the University of Toronto to face the city, to ensure that our doors are open to the community. We are anything but an ivory tower. And I just want to go through this slide very briefly with you, and you can see that this is an enormous annual economic contribution to the Canadian economy of almost $16 billion, an annual economic contribution to the GTA of almost $7 billion. And what people find most surprising is that 18,000 people are directly employed at the University of Toronto. That is larger, that is more than Chrysler and GM employs in all of Canada combined. And one of the things that we don't do is we don't talk about our startups. And those startup companies are extraordinary. In the past 5 years, more than 80 startup companies. I know my colleague Scott Mabry will talk a little bit about innovation. Councillor Kelly, I think you'll find that interesting, and how we're fostering economic growth and improving lives of some of our incubators that you were just referring to. I will stop but just say the following. I don't think we tell our stories enough. And today we thank you for the opportunity for doing that. I'm going to end by telling you about those 3 little pictures just at the top. So on the left, those things that look like lamps. This is a company called OTI Lumionics, developing a new organic light-emitting technology that makes possible paper-thin, light, flexible, cost-effective, and energy-efficient screens of light. They were recently awarded $5.7 million from the Canadian Sustainable Development Technology Fund for a pilot production line. They employ about a dozen staff already in Toronto. Let me talk to you about the middle one. I think that's probably my favorite. Jimmy Chu, a U of T graduate, co-founded a company, a green technology company called Nanoleaf, which has developed the world's most energy-efficient bulb. They say it lasts 27 years. They're not 27, but they say it lasts 27 years. And it's made of circuit boards. It's very, very bright, extremely bright. And they have now opened an R&D center at Mars. They're manufacturing in China. And I can tell you that every visitor that comes to the University of Toronto, and we have over 100 delegations a year of international, very, very prominent international guests, we present them with a Nanoleaf. And those Nanoleafs can be used in China or here or wherever. It's a hugely interesting innovation. And on the right is Exogenic, founded by Professor Shana Kelly, an extraordinary researcher who's developed a technology, a new technology for diagnostic testing for infectious diseases. It's easy to use, it's inexpensive, it reduces delays and costs to vastly improve the way patients receive care. She's a serial entrepreneur. We are happy to introduce these faculty and many more. These are the companies of today and the future. We would love to welcome councillors and the city into the labs, show you the kind of work that's going on, and ensure they understand what we have on our doorstep. I think we're hiding it a little bit too much. So I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Scott Mabry.
And I'm going to shine a little bit of light on the St. George campus itself, not to diminish or suggest the rest of the city's gray, but I want to focus here. Part of this is that we've, historically, the University of Toronto campus, St. George, sitting on the north end, originally of the downtown, the city has grown up around it. It remains an oasis, engaged and deeply involved in the broader city. We're in the midst of a secondary plan. We are looking at this from evolving character areas. The very center, the green, is the historic core. We also have the Huron-Sussex neighborhood up and to the left of the slide, and the yellow. Talk a little bit more about that. I do want to point out our historical sort of core extends to the edges as well. One Spadina, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But last night, our Monk's School building at the corner of Devonshire and Bloor won the Heritage Toronto's Award of Merit for a rehabilitated building. So we're very, very proud of that. I'm going to talk a little bit about capital projects, some entrepreneurial activities and partnerships, but this slide shows you all the space either U of T St. George owns or is occupying. We do rent significant space outside of the campus. You may or may not know we have significant holdings at Yonge and Bloor at 730 Yonge Street and 35. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, all the way over to Site 1, and certainly around Mars and across the street in the Banting and Best Center, there are various entrepreneurial activities going on. In the core, we are doing currently $344 million worth of construction, lots of small projects, a number of big ones. You will be aware of the upper left picture here is One Spadina project, a fabulous project for our Daniels Faculty of Architecture and Landscape Design, the Law Building up on Queens Crescent in the middle, the Rotman Building on St. George in the upper right, the Gold Ring Center on the bottom right. Who could imagine a basketball court building could be so beautiful and so engaging as this has turned out to be? The new engineering building, we're not out of the ground yet. We're still in the digging the hole stages in the middle. And then, of course, the back campus that we did and City Council saw a couple years ago that turned out so fabulously for the Pan Am Games. And I can tell you, thousands of extra students this fall alone are able to use those fields that wouldn't have been under the old project. We also, it's not just about individual buildings. We now have a university-wide 3-campus project called the Landscape of Landmark Quality, where we're selecting a proponent to help us re-engage the historic core connections with our heritage buildings. We hope to pedestrianize King's College Circle and to prioritize the individual over the car. Right now, that roadway has 9 meters for cars and 1 meter for people. We want to reverse that. Entrepreneurial activities, as Judith mentioned, are very key. The Mars Building and across the street, Banting and Best. Our building envelope for that Banting and Best site, those are old demolition-ready buildings, will be roughly the size of the Mars West Tower. We've recently completed a purchase of 20% of that Mars Tower. In there, we are partnering with the Government of Ontario, Mars, and J-Labs, a Johnson & Johnson subsidiary that's going to deliver an incubator in there of 40,000 square feet. Jobs and Prosperity Fund flowing to University of Toronto, $18.3 million to support that effort. These folks will join the entrepreneurial ecosystem that is the University of Toronto. We have 9 campus-led accelerators already on all 3 campuses. We produce, in the Banting and Best buildings that we've repurposed, we have 24 currently student-led spin-out companies. We have centers of commercialization. The University of Toronto leads all universities in North America with respect to spin-out startups, and we're talking about incorporated companies, and our metric that we follow are job creation. As I said, we have significant holdings at 730 Yonge. We basically own the bottom 1/3 of the block bounded by Bloor, Yonge, and Charles. That will be a major redevelopment site. You will appreciate significant change in that area. We first, though, need, because we have student families living in that building, fairly far from campus, in close consultation and partnership with our local councillor and the Huron-Sussex community, it's our northwest quadrant, we have developed a plan for intensification of housing in the northwest sector, 650 units of housing, including mid-rise developments along Spadina, expansion of our graduate house, and most interestingly, laneway housing. We own 87 units in this area. You can see in the middle, deep lots, the ability to do laneway housing in a significant way. We're currently working with Tom Payne, Evergreen, to do the first 3 pilots in that. I'm going to end with one slide, and that is what we call Site 1. The most unique corner in the city of Toronto, Spadina and Bloor. Unique because it has 2 subway lines that cross, plus a major streetcar line. There's 1 million gross square feet of space here that we hope to redevelop for academic space, for faculty staff housing, and for significant retail commercial, because we believe this has great potential to resonate with our president's interest of engaging with the city in building out opportunity.
Thank you.
Great. Good morning. I'm the executive head of U of T's Eastern Campus, University of Toronto Scarborough.
Yay, Scarborough.
Yay, Scarborough is right. As you know from earlier presentations, we seek to contribute to addressing the needs of another part of Toronto, the eastern part of Toronto, a part that has long been underserved despite rapid and diverse population growth in recent years. We seek to become the major economic, social, and cultural institution for this part of our city, not just a leading-edge educational institution. And to that end, we work closely with ECDEV, TESS, social development, and other city agencies. And as you know, we're a proud partner with the City of Toronto in the operation of the Toronto Pan American Sports Centre, change-making facility in the eastern part of the city. a showcase for the recently concluded Pan American and Para-Pan American Games. Now in its 51st year, UTSC has evolved into a comprehensive, full-service, research-intensive university. It sits on the largest undeveloped land holdings of any Canadian university. We're currently at 13,000 students plus and plan to grow to 15,000 by the end of this decade. And as you'll see from the next slide, we have further growth planned after that. This slide shows you the artist's impression of the approved master plan for the expansion of the campus north from Ellesmere, east and west of Military Trail. This slide shows you the work underway with the Toronto Pan American Sports Centre, or TPAS, to the north, with the recently opened Environmental Science and Chemistry building just on the west side of Military Trail, just north of Ellesmere, and planned new student residences, further academic buildings, a planned arts building that we plan to develop in conjunction with the community, and a conference hotel serving TPASC, the university, and East Toronto. UTSC presents a regional opportunity to redefine and revitalize Scarborough in a way that furthers the skill development and attributes of young people throughout the GTA. We draw students from all over the GTA, although East Toronto, Scarborough remain our most important catchment area. We seek to further engage with surrounding communities and important regional partners such as the Toronto Zoo, Rouge National Park, and the Rouge Valley Health System. We want to do that in a way that creates economic benefit for the entire community. Our immediate task is to move the master plan to a secondary plan. We have experienced tremendous growth and economic activity, yet we've never had a secondary plan. In fact, we're still governed by the old and outdated Highland Creek secondary plan and the Highland Creek Community Zoning Bylaw 10827, which is woefully out of date. And so we're moving ahead with a secondary plan that would speak to who we are today and who we seek to be in the years ahead. To that, under the leadership of our CAO, Andrew Arafuzzaman, we are seeking to make UTSC an anchor institution along the lines of the model developed by the Atkinson Foundation and others, to be a major local employer, a major community partner in youth, artistic, social development, and so on, and to leverage our ongoing construction and our operations to create and sustain jobs for the people of Scarborough and to regenerate business in Scarborough as a result. We're already the regional leader. We seek to play an even more community partnership role as a hub for working with some important community partners, some of which are listed on the slide. So thank you very, very much for your time. All of us would be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Councilor Frakadakis, remember, I just want to remind everyone, we have a hard stop at 11:30. No, I'm just saying. No, of course.
So I've had the pleasure of working with Professor Daniel Bender at UTSC. He's the Canada Research Chair in Cultural History and Analysis, and he's on our Culinary Tourism Trail Working Group, and he's brought both an important perspective and an understanding of what kind of community resources we might avail ourselves. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how we might foster more of that kind of, my paper stuck together, collaboration with U of T and initiatives going on here at City Hall. And that's open to any one of you or all of you.
where do we start? We have important research, teaching partnerships with community organizations, one center of which is Culinaria, our food project, looking at the local food providers. We have a group of students and faculty currently mapping the places to eat along Lawrence Avenue. Our focus at UTSC has been on Scarborough and the Eastern GTA, but if there's ways to partner with other parts of the city in that food initiative, in our sport and recreation outreach initiative, in some of our social initiatives, we could certainly do that. I know there are faculty and student bodies very interested in doing that. We also are the co-op campus of the University of Toronto. We have student placements all over the GTA, particularly in Scarborough. Another avenue for that cooperation could be further co-op placements in city agencies or some of the city partner agencies, so we could create 3 institution partnerships for the benefit of all of us and our students.
I don't know, Professor Maybury, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say that one of the things that all of us can take great pride in is the success of the TPACS facility. It is the best PPP that I know of, 50% owned by the city, 50% owned by the University of Toronto, fabulously successful operationally, financially, from a community, from a university perspective. I mention that simply because we now have a positive example to imagine doing things together that wouldn't have been possible before. That conversation, your folks and our folks, been year plus, lawyers, everybody else, figuring out how to do that together. And now it's nothing but a kumbaya experience. It has really worked well. And so for me, the future now has a lot more opportunity than it did before.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Carroll?
Yes, I zeroed in on the stat, I think it was early in the presentation, 2,600 students receiving work-integrated learning. And I was looking for it in the presentation because there's nothing worse than a counselor who's been on a conference. I was just on a conference and I heard some stuff. The presentation that we were looking at is transit planning in relation to urban campuses. But for me, it went way beyond that because I thought we have a lot of urban campuses, and U of T in such a central place is quite rare at this point. But beyond transit planning, I was kind of blown away by the demographer's statement. He said, you know, you have right now these big campuses where people tend to enter it as on-campus learners, then they get into programs where they may be leaving for a while, and if they come back, it's in a work-integrated setting, and throughout their whole career from there on in, there are MOOCs. And you have an extensive list of MOOCs, but he said, get ready for this, because demographics and socioeconomic realities in both Canada and the US are such that that's not going to be possible for a lot of families. So it's going to become, you first spend a few years struggling and taking MOOCs, and then you maybe can afford going to campus, but only as a work-integrated learner. So the 2,600 students has to become the thousands and thousands of students. So you become more of a work and R&D place than a lecture hall place. And he says that shift is coming. Does your transit plan take into account that everyone's not going to come hurtling towards the campus at the age of 18? And does the campus know that they're changing into that? We're halfway there in this presentation. Is there a real sense of that over the next 20 years?
So we, in the new engineering building, we're building a 500-seat inverted classroom. An inverted classroom because we believe universities' on-campus experiences are going to be important, but we believe they'll be different. We believe students will view the lecture at home at their leisure, and then come to engage with fellow students and the prof and teaching assistant. So we built the largest inverted classroom in North America, is going up right now. Students,
Yeah, it's huge.
4 to
I
6
looked at
students
it.
together can work on problems in a room that will hold 500 with the faculty and the TAs working around. It's also a room that, it's an engineering building, they can bring in a solar car and have the car be part of that inverted learning experience. It's the way the University of Toronto is adapting to what we believe are changes, but we also know that ultimately an interpersonal experience, both with fellow students and with the prof, is going to be key. And we don't believe that that will change, and it is the quality of that interaction is what we're trying to capture in our infrastructure.
Let me just add one thing, if I might, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, and that's the internationalization of the campus. So now 20% of the University of Toronto is made up of students from all over the world. But that doesn't mean they all have to come and they all have to stay. So for instance, one of our key courses offered by Professor Joseph Wong at Fudan University in Shanghai, and every year he takes students from U of T to Fudan. They bring their own students and they learn together. They spend 3 weeks or so, and then they go back and they continue that education together, and they continue doing joint projects, and they continue with their papers. So we have to take into account, and frankly, it's not taken into account, it is a massive opportunity for us to be able to partner internationally with students from all over the world and faculty from all over the world. No longer do you have to get on an airplane. That technology gives us access to information around the world, and we are doing it in leaps and bounds.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Cho?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm a graduate of U of T myself. I got my master's degree in social work, master in education, and the EDD. Also, I'm a Scarborough counselor, just north of Scarborough campus. Now, do you have any statistics? What percentage of U of T students say Scarborough campus, they are foreign student, visa students? And then what kind of thing the university does to attract more foreign students? It's very strong competition among all these universities, not just Canada, but States, Europe, all that. Sure.
So I can talk generally for the institution as a whole, but across all 3 campuses, and 20 years ago, we were 2.7% international. Now we were well north of 20. Incoming classes in arts and science and engineering are north of 30% international. There is no university of our size in the world with that array of internationalization with its undergrad student body. And I'm talking about undergrads primarily. And this is in all 3 campuses. And it's across most divisions. We don't, in some of the professional divisions, the numbers are lower, but architecture is almost 25% international, for instance. So this has been a trend, been rising for 15 years. We are competing with the best in the world, and most importantly, as those numbers rise, quality has risen as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's very good. Yeah. Next, do you have any kind of sistership university? For example, it's already 50 years ago when I was in Korea. Maryland University, they had a sister university in Seoul, Korea, for language and arts, humanities, that kind of thing. Do we have a U of T, another branch in other countries?
We do not have another branch of the university in any other countries. We have a very rich array of partnerships in countries across the world. So in Korea, for instance, with Yonsei University, with Postek University, I've spent time there. Our partnerships are with peer institutions, frankly, across the globe. And those partnerships they're not just a question of signing an agreement and putting it in a drawer. You have to implement those partnerships with exchanges of researchers, students, staff, and so indeed we have them in every continent. And students come, of course, both ways, absolutely.
I see. Okay, Now, I happen to be a chair of Toronto Zoo, and the U of T is a regional development leaders, right? Now, we're thinking of how we could construct an environment learning center. So when we get to the final stage, can we approach U of T and get some help in so many ways, whether it's knowledge base, whether it's a financial, whether leadership participation, that kind of thing?
Certainly, and I'd like to bring you and your group to our newly opened Environmental Science and Chemistry building, which is a showcase of the use of passive sources of energy to heat and light an important building, and introduce you to faculty and staff who might very well like to contribute to that venture.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cho. Councillor Kelly?
Thank you. Well, a very impressive survey of where you're at and where you're going. I participated in a World City Conference in London last November, and one of the questions that I attempted to answer is, why is Toronto doing so well and is so widely admired? And one of the reasons that I gave was that we have a magnificent array of post-secondary institutions in this city, and we seem to attract students from all around the world who are bright and skilled, and you know, you certainly are giving very strong evidence to support that thesis. Last year I met with the president of York University and Ryerson, and one of the reasons I did that was to get a sense of how the universities could work together. They have formed very effective relationships with the community colleges, but I'm not too sure how they synergistically work among themselves. Competition is obviously there, but so too hopefully is cooperation. And what is that relationship today, and what might it become in the years that lie ahead?
So, yes, I mean, I don't even know where to start. So both my colleagues are saying, what about this and what about this? Yes, the answer is yes. So let me start with transportation, which is, of course, an obsession of all of ours, where President Gertler has worked together with 3 other university presidents from York, Ryerson, and OCAD to get together, and they are working on what are some of the joint issues that we have to deal with, both in terms of the provision and the issues of using transportation infrastructure. That's one issue. The second is our relationship with colleges. We have partnerships with, and Scott will mention this, with Sheridan, with Seneca, with Centennial. So indeed, you can't do it alone. The issue for us is, where is the smartest way to add the best differentiation and make the sum greater than its parts? And absolutely committed to that. So let me give you 2 examples. You go with down.
So one example is that we're working with Ottawa, Queen's, Western, and McMaster, the 5 universities with medical schools, to build, and this sounds boring, a warehouse up at Steeles and Downsview, because we own a lot of land up there.
Which
And
side of Steeles?
Sorry?
Which side of Steeles?
Southeast.
Okay, good.
Oh, okay, good. So we're building a Toronto, a book reference and book repository that all of us will share. We're doing this because it's very close to the 407, very close to the 401, so if we need to access that book. But we're building a facility for the entire province of Ontario, and frankly, for the whole country. Universities store books. If you have a book that isn't checked out within 10 years, it needs to be in a different place as opposed to on campus. These universities are coming together because they understand the cost structure, and this is a place where together we're going to be stronger. We're going to be able to use our resources. The province gave us a few million. We're spending 10. I can draw you a savings of $500 million by doing this project, and we're doing it together.
I'll give you one more current example.
Well, the most recent example is the immediate response of the four Toronto universities to the crisis of immigration, migration, refugees from Syria, whereby the four universities are partnering in supporting Lifeline Syria, which has been mounted by Ryerson University, as well as doing things on their own, such as in the case of University of Toronto, creating a $1 million plus fund to provide free tuition to Syrian refugees in Canada now or identified as on their way. The time of migration through the horrendous bureaucracy at the moment is a huge issue. But to ensure that Syrian refugees whose academic careers have been interrupted have opportunity to study with our support at the University of Toronto, and the other universities are supporting that. So, and that was simply a case in the middle of the crisis where the four presidents picked up the phone and decided to do these things together. So that happens a lot.
I'll address, I only have 5 minutes, so I'll address the balance of my questions to Dr. Kidd. On one of the pages that talks about the Pan Am legacy, could you identify that legacy and tell me how well it worked during the Pan Am Games and since then?
Well, it was terrific during the games.
First of all, what was it? The legacy?
Well, I mean...
Is it the Aquatic Center?
The Toronto Pan American Sports Centre is more than aquatic center, but it's a knock your socks off aquatic center with 2 Olympic-sized pools, with all of the accessibility features that have come out of the experience of the last 40 years around the world, with a breathtaking diving tank, aesthetically beautiful, with diving towers that look like Innu sculptures. Now that the temporary seating has been removed, it's got a glass wall looking east. It's an extraordinarily beautiful facility. But it's not just an aquatic center. It's a field house. It's a strength fitness, movement fitness, health center that is the best in the city. And in addition to that, the primary tenant is the Canadian Sports Institute Ontario, the Ontario High Performance Training Center, which only existed virtually before this. So it's a plus, 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 win, win, win for all of us. I would have said that even without the Pan Ams, if the Pan Ams had been a bust, Toronto UTSC would have benefited enormously from that building. But the games themselves brought so much attention to the university and the East End of Toronto. People came, they saw what a beautiful campus it is, what a beautiful facility it is, what a beautiful university we are, and it branded Scarborough in a very positive way. And people all around the world saw that Scarborough is the place to be when it comes to what we call from the puddle to the podium. And that's just for starters.
One last question, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for your generosity. To build on Councillor Cho's question with respect to the zoo, I've sat on that board on and off for a number of years, and I often thought that its future lay in becoming Zoo U. I'd like to reinforce the direction that Councillor Cho gave through his questions, and that is to ask you to open up negotiations or discussions with the leadership of the zoo to see what can be worked out between the two of you, and in my eyes, to facilitate this concept of Zoo U. It's got lots of land up there. Can you do that with everything else that you have on your plate right now?
I mean, that's a very big question. We currently have a working partnership with the zoo. We currently teach a course up there. We currently recognize some of the zoo senior colleagues as adjunct faculty, and they're engaged with our faculty in research projects, and those will expand. We have our own land site to fill up. The zoo has it, so, maybe in 50 years, and transportation is a nightmare for people in that part. So getting to where you want to be is going to take a little bit longer, but I'm grateful for your support.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Kidd.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, so members, we have exhausted the questions. Again, we have a hard stop. We have 2 more presentations. Is there anyone to speak? Seeing none? Oh, Councillor Cho?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for coming out. I'd like to thank you personally. Now, I think it's last year, the president of Harvard University said at the orientation program for new students, and I learned that he said, you are not here to get a job after the graduation from Harvard, but you are here to create jobs. And I'm sure that the U of T is doing that, and especially in the green industry. Everything goes so green, green, green these days, after the climate change, all that. And I'm glad that Councillor Kelly kind of did ask a follow-up question. Toronto Zoo is a really excellent organization for the environment, education, all that kind of thing. So one of these days, I'd like to come and visit and seek some help from you. Okay?
Thank you very much, Councillor Cho. Councillor Kelly?
Well, Mr. Chair, Canadians are supposed to be very humble, soft-spoken, but I've never forgotten the advice that we got at one of the deputy mayor roundtables last year from the person who was representing Hackernest. And what he told Councillor Thompson and myself at that meeting was, shout it out. And my response was, we're Canadians, we don't boast. And he said, well, you better. If you got it, flaunt it, because you're in competition around the world for people, skills, and investment. And I think what you've done today is give a very impressive example of the quality of institutional life here in the City of Toronto. And I'm delighted to, through one avenue or another, to boast, brag about what we have in the City of Toronto, and I'd like to thank you for your contribution to that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Anyone else? Okay. I'd like to move receipt of the presentation and to simply say that this is a work in progress. This is a university that is the best kept secret, I think, in line with Councillor Kelly's comment. We have a lot of work to do. This is part of that process in order to establish a framework, how we work with the University of Toronto and how we work with our other institutions. As been said, Andrew and I have worked together on a number of initiatives, but particularly as it related to the Pan Am facilities in terms of the funding and financing. The early days, they weren't pretty. And now everything's perfect, which is great. I don't want to move a motion to specifically suggest what we are going to do, but just as I chatted with the DCM and also the general manager about moving forward, Ms. Wolfson and your colleagues and Mr. Kidd, I know I have to come for a visit, U of T, Scarborough campus. Andrew and Mr. Duguid and others have sort of took me around, but we'll come back for another visit. I just want to simply say that we're just going to leave this open for the moment, but that it's a process which we're looking to see how we can formulate some more sort of constructive opportunities in terms of working. And also, as Councillor Kelly has pointed out, we will continue to promote and talk about the University of Toronto in a very positive way. In my travels around the world, I do that on a regular basis. People do know that you exist, but I think that we want to even make sure that it's much more enunciated. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And we do have some information you have, and we're happy at any time to come and host or do whatever you think might be helpful. And we really appreciate the time today.
Thank you very much. So all those in favor of receipt? Opposed? Carries. Okay, members, we have 2 more presentations left, and we've got, as I said, a hard stop. I'd like to ask Mr. Carew, Mr. Miskin, you're next on the agenda, and we have the state of business improvement areas in the city. Thank you.
In light of being pressed for time here, I don't think it'd be fair to the committee, fair to the 81 BIAs, 82 BIAs in light of your earlier motion for us to do our presentation. I was going to promise to do it under an hour, but no, 10 minutes is just not enough. And I know I have some colleagues here that have joined us. Some of them have left. So I think it'd be in the best interest of our members and this committee, because we truly believe that there is some important information here that needs to be shared. So we'd like to come back to your November 24th Economic Development Committee meeting and ask that we be the first presentation.
Okay, I think that members, we're okay with that? Okay, that would be fantastic.
Thank
Give
you.
you more time. Thank you. Apologies. Yes, so motion to defer. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Thank you. All right, so members, we're moving next to our next item, ED 7.7, programs to promote economic revitalization in distressed retail area. We have one speaker, Jan Sanderson. John Sanderson. Going twice, John, spelled Jon, Sanderson. Okay, problem. Okay, members, we have this matter in front of us. What say you? Councillor, okay, so we have questions of staff? Okay, we'll start with Councillor Carroll, please.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. This pilot specifically is about retail avenues. Is that, so it has to be an avenue? We can't use other models? Is that the case?
For you, Mr. Chair, we're focusing on distressed retail areas. If you mean by avenues, whether they coincide
Well,
with
that's why I asked, because to me, if you want to talk about the future of distressed retail areas, it's one of the biggest stressors is going to be the evolution of big box areas. I'm not picking on it, it's just because it's the area I know the best. Along Eglinton, while they're thriving, popping up big boxes, there are dead ones here and there, which I understand is going to be a growing phenomenon. And then dead retail large sites. We have some dead Targets around town. And so this pilot doesn't really reach that, but this pilot does look at using the pop-up model. So what I'm wondering is there any flexibility? We're going to start with these two areas, but is there a flexibility that we broaden out to we're going to work on retail distressed areas no matter what form they take?
That's absolutely correct. I think the two pilot projects will inform us moving forward and how it could be transferred to other areas across the city.
Okay, and have the areas been chosen, or you want to adopt this and then you'll go back and figure out which on the map you're going to use?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't chosen the areas yet, only that they will be in a neighborhood improvement area so that we could work with.
Somewhere on that map in the attachment.
That's right.
Okay, okay. I don't think I'm going to ask any more questions at this time, Mr. Chair, but I do want to speak to this because it relates to another matter that's going to be before council this very next session.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Frакadakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. So I think this is a very promising project, and I'm pleased to see it come forward. So you mentioned the great work that DECA has done with pop-up shops, and will they play a role in this project?
Yes, they will. We've been in consultation with them for several months now, and we're looking at ways that we can deliver a pop-up shop model that they created and is truly successful.
Okay, great.
We'll continue to do so.
Thank you. In page 6 of the report, there's a section that reads that the proposed BIA capacity building program would alter the current focus of BIA operations from capital improvement to capacity improvement in distressed neighborhoods. Streetscape beautification may be an effective means of enhancing the vitality of areas where there is a healthy level of investment. However, disinvested areas require context-specific, capacity-oriented solutions. So you give a couple of examples of capacity building, but can you elaborate a little bit more on this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, distressed retail areas, probably their first priority is not to improve their streetscapes, but to build their organizations from within. So some of the capacity building we're doing is we're looking to partner with a post-secondary institution to deliver governance programs so that the staff and the board members are better prepared to tackle the challenges that are ahead of them.
Okay, and in the interest of time, my last question is, what might be learned from all of this that could be extended to other commercial areas? I'm thinking of areas that have a BIA that need some help, and areas where the retail strip might be too small for a BIA, but play a critical community role, so need to be supported.
Some of what we learn and some of the capacity building initiatives that we undertake, for example, working with a post-secondary institution, that would certainly be open to BIAs that currently exist. We don't want to create we have a very successful model for retail revitalization in this city, and it's the BIA model. And everything we do should be looking to build upon that. Certainly what we learned from this pilot can be transferred to other areas that are not quite BIAs, but we believe the way to go is to get them to become BIAs and highly functioning BIAs.
Fair, but my question really was around, like, some areas have a BIA and yet they still need help, and I don't have to tell you, because you and I both know where some of those areas are.
Absolutely. There are current BIAs that need to build their capacity. We're doing so with some of the things we offer now, like the board training sessions we do, but they would certainly benefit by being part of this accreditation program that we're exploring with the post-secondary institutions.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cho?
Thank you. So my understanding of this program, revitalization, is like another BIA program without using the word, but it's more fast track kind of thing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I wouldn't say it's fast-tracked, but these areas, businesses in these areas really need a little bit more hand-holding. They need to we need to be able to show them that there's a benefit to becoming a BIA and to help them along a little bit more than we do through our normal BIA startup process.
Mm-hmm. I see. So I heard you saying we haven't decided which two areas. Do you think maybe one east of Yonge, one west of Yonge, so that we could compare two models later on?
We are involved already in a couple of neighborhood improvement areas. Some in Scarborough. There's already people on the ground out there. So we are looking at Scarborough. I would be open to suggestions, but we do need to sit down with SDFA and determine what two areas may be best to pilot the project.
Mm-hmm. So at the beginning, I'm just raising that question. You have any kind of baseline study before it's opening up, the jobs available or the sale, the crime rate, and so that when you compare later on, you have a baseline data, so you could compare whether the project has been successful or it's a fail, you know?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a very good point, and that's what we would do in the first phase of the capacity building is take a snapshot of where that business area is today, how many vacancies are there, what are some of the challenges. that would be one of the very first things we start to do.
So you're going to have a baseline study too, right? Okay, I read somewhere the first evaluation of the result will be second quarter of next year. The final is at the end of 2017. Isn't that better that we do every 6 months once these projects are implemented?
Throughout the different phases, we'll be doing evaluation, but we want to really see how everything, once it comes together and once everything's been implemented, how have we done? So it's best to wait and give some time to see some results before we do the evaluation.
So the interim report will come to this committee then, on a regular basis more so?
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chair. Councillor Kelly?
How do you define distressed? And what's the data that shapes that definition?
We've defined distressed as areas. A lot of the work's been done through SDFA, where there's high unemployment, problems with youth unemployment.
How high is high?
Maybe I'll defer to SDFA on how they define their neighborhood improvement areas.
So through the, Mr. Chair, what we used is the Urban Heart Well-Being Index of Economic Opportunities, and there are several indicators in there, and we've rated each of the neighborhoods relative to the City of Toronto in terms of economic opportunities, whether it's employment, number of residents on Ontario assistance. So there are a number of indicators. Unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me, but I can provide that information to you.
And would the, how do you define neighborhoods so that you know you've got a clearly defined organic context within which to implement your policies?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, Social Development, Finance and Administration uses our social planning neighborhoods. The city has 140 social planning neighborhoods that are defined geographically, and they're out of the 140, we have 31 neighborhood improvement areas that are social planning areas.
Now, you're basing what you plan to do on the experience of other neighborhoods, and I guess asking the question that Councillor Cho asked, and that is your database, not only for the community that you want to, in which you want to implement these programs, but the communities whose experience you're going to utilize in implementing those programs. So you've got the pop-up shop model. Do you have before and after data? And if you do, in which categories? And for DECA, do you have the same sort of before and after information?
DECA's been highly involved in one business improvement area on the Danforth. They've been quite successful. I don't have those numbers right in front of me. But what they've really done is provided a toolkit that can be implemented in other areas of the city. So part of the, again, first phase will be to see how many vacant shops do we have today, and implementing the DECA model, how many will we have 5 months, 6 months down the road?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. To speak, Councillor Carroll? Okay, just let me know. Go ahead. We're at 11:32. But, yeah, go ahead. It's fine. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, you've indicated here that this program is for areas that have been defined as distressed areas. And part of the reason that these areas are having already financial difficulties, how do you overcome the issue of the additional fees and additional BIA fees that these people would have to pay when they already have financial challenges. How do you deal with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's an excellent question. And what we have to do in those areas is to get these businesses excited about becoming a BIA and showing them the success that they can have with, quite frankly, it doesn't have to be a huge budget either. With a very limited budget, there are things you can do on your own, and ideally with partnerships with other community groups out in their neighborhood to affect real change.
All right. And last question is, so this is for a startup. You've got 6 stages of growth for a startup, a BIA. What about, what's your current plan, or do you have one, for current BIAs who are also experiencing some form of distress or difficulty?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we see some of these phases would be open, like the capacity building phase, where we enter into a partnership with a post-secondary institution. That would be available to all BIAs, and not just the board members, but the coordinators, so that they can learn best practices from other BIAs. So it would be open to them.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Carroll to speak.
Thank you, yes. So I read this report with great interest because I struggle with retail because as Mr. Major knows, I'm in a ward that has not one avenue. But I do know that we have to work on these. But what I'm hoping is that we do the pilot. I don't need data on whether or not DECA is successful. Stores were vacant and now they have leases. That's all the data I need, which is great. But what I'm hoping is that we do look at the pop-up model and how it functions. And while the pilot's going on, you're thinking all the time, how would I scale this up and move it to other types of distressed retail? And I think it's going to have to be a combination between both planning and economic development, because there's distressed retail because we put it in the wrong place in the first place, and that was a function of planning. And we're in some ways still making that mistake with our requirement of retail at grade. If we've got massive development along an avenue, which we will all along Eglinton from end to end, along Shepherd Avenue throughout Scarborough, and we're saying retail at grade, but there's no guide to it, then we're going to end up with distressed retail all over every suburb. And so we can correct some of the mistakes. And going in to look at a distressed area, why did it fail in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s? Let's not build into the new millennium the same failed mistakes. I'd have a fight to insist that in a very busy avenue of development, somewhere that retail grade had to be large enough square footage to be the core, the anchor, or all the shops would be constantly changing their leases and no one would thrive. There better be an anchor somewhere on this block. And they were saying, well, what the heck are you talking about? So I know that planning is starting to train planners in this, but I think economic development has to inform it, and I think this pilot can help. Because I think it will inform those things, that retail grade that we're putting in now, whatever we learn from working in this distress model. But my questions earlier were about, I hope we're also thinking, what can we move into the areas that we have, which are the big box problems? At council, in the very next council session, you're going to look at an item from North York, which is coming without recommendation. We are happy to have heritage frontage cooperation and a new purpose for the old Coca-Cola facility in Thorncliffe, except that the use we found is a Costco. And that would be okay, because they're going to leave the Coke bottle in the front, in the frontage of the building, which is stopped my husband from crying because he loves that building. He loves Coca-Belia. Except that across the street there's a dead mall, a dead Target space, and all of the stores around it are dying in a sea of cement surface parking. In a neighborhood that is super diverse, super entrepreneurial. We know because they're solving all of their community center and parks problems through a great network of women working with Jeff Kettle to do entrepreneurial stuff. And yet, we don't have a strategy to let them take all that see-through real estate in the Thorncliffe Mall and do something pop-up with it. Because we only know how to do pop-up in avenues. What can we do in a facility? We know that that works somewhere. That's how they changed the Chelsea market and took that giant building and made it pop up. So I'm hoping that while we're doing this pilot, we're thinking, okay, that's how we organize these people into using that model. What would we do if we were using a big cement barn that has to be revitalized? I think what we really need, Mr. Chair, and I think maybe the committee needs to talk to the general manager, is after this pilot, looking at what are all the different types of places where the retail dying sometimes devalues the whole neighborhood, and what are our proactive strategies around it.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The goal, as I understand it, is to revive retail neighborhoods through the creation of healthy BIAs. I hope that's an accurate summary of the intention of this program. That's a highly laudable goal, and I commend the staff for moving in that direction. However, a number of people have indicated in conversation with me over the years that perhaps Toronto is over-retailed, and that the reason you have unhealthy retail areas is because they simply don't fit the economic dynamics of the city. As presented today, it's more of a warm, fuzzy idea than it is a hard, structural one. As Drucker reminded us, if you can't measure something, you can't manage it. And so I would hope that when we next see an update on this initiative, that we have more what I would describe hard data, because it's the existence of that hard data that frankly makes staff accountable to this committee and this council, and the city to its residents. So I hope you're listening closely, and I certainly wish you well. There are a number of variables that are at play here. The definition of a neighborhood, how people live their lives. I don't know what percentage of the population lives in one neighborhood but tends to work somewhere else. I'm not sure of how you integrate the social goals and the social data into an economic framework and explain the relationship between the two of them. But I think it's worth the effort, and again, I wish you well.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Cho to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I came home late last night after attending Canada-India Business Council 12th annual Diwali Gala. I saw Councillor Kelly, Shelley Carroll was there. Anyway, I got up early this morning and read this report agenda. The first thing that came to my mind was the Pittsburgh, the city where my oldest boy, he lives in very well-to-do area. And I love golf, so when I go there, I play golf, March break, summer holidays. One area when I drive to go to course, so run-down area, so many houses, they block the door and window and no shops. Even the behavior of people working so slow and so distressed, really, and depressed. And when I read this Agenda A, this is a good one, but we have to make it very successful. And it's one thing to have a structure, bring in some money, all good ideas, but if everybody doesn't work hard, I don't know whether we could bring success or not. One concern I had when I read somewhere is a pop-up store, empty store, and it gives only 1 month of the owner. If owner wants to have a store back, then he or she could take it back. So if people working so hard to make a store shopping, the sales so successful, and then 1 month later we have to give it up, give up. So I'm just wondering whether that the 1 month period could be extended at least 6 months. See, if I'm the worker, try to make business successful, if I have only 1 month, get the notice, get eviction, then I don't know whether I'm going to work that hard. So there's certain areas, it's just one example, right? So you have to work out all different corners, how we can make it successful. And I'm expecting, I will support the recommendation, but I like to see very successful report from now on until the end. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cho. I'd like to simply move the item and just to say that the council's direction, obviously in February, I believe, was to essentially do this and to embark on a process. You've all identified the fact that this is a pilot program. There are, I'm sure, a myriad of questions and particular viewpoints or perspective and so on in order to bring this forward, sort of a base process in terms of what's the baseline, what are you measuring, and where will you get to, and how do you sort of understand that variation and so on. And also I mentioned to staff about benefits. I mean, there needs to be an understanding in terms of what the benefits will be, the outcome, and those things. And and they get it. They will see this. We are all desperate to try to ensure that we help to revitalize areas, not just in our respective wards, but across the city, because we want to see prosperity, we want to see the enhancement of wealth, we want to see all of these things take place so that people will have the ability to do all the things that some people may take for granted and to have the jobs and so on. That's part of the essence of this particular committee. And so, it's not a perfect solution or fit to the problem, but it is absolutely a bit of a growing and a stepping of a footprint in order to try to address or start to highlight and shine the light, as council has directed us to go through this particular process. Staff are working, obviously, and along with obviously others, and it's not just the folks from, we talked about SDFA and so on, because I think others will come in with their input as well. And I know University of Toronto was here earlier. Maybe it's an opportunity to hear from them, to collaborate, to expand that reach, to garner more information and insight and so on. So hopefully that's part of what we take away from this. So simply put, it's a work in progress, and staff are earnestly trying to respond to council's direction on this particular issue. We certainly wish them good luck, and we too, as members of this committee, want to be able to continue to have some input as part of the process. I would like, obviously, to ensure that we have updated information coming forward to us so that we're able to assess the sort of the work plan that's ongoing. I'm not going to move that particular motion per se. Pardon? No, I don't. Yeah, so we're not going to move that. The professional staff that are here, we rely on them on a daily basis. We obviously accept the great work that they do, and we will look forward to the information coming forward, and we are open to continue to work with you, and I suspect some members may have some ideas as to areas that they'd like to maybe see the revitalization flashlight be shined upon in order to maybe see whether or not those areas can be brought forward. All right, so I'm going to move the recommendations here, move the report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, members, we have concluded the business as set out in front of the agenda. Councillor, did you have a
I did. I know we're about to break. Before we break, I just wanted to mention to members of this committee that we're celebrating World Food Day today at 1 o'clock on the square. Today is the last farmers market on Nathan Phillips Square. So if you all want to come out at 1 o'clock, if you're free and you don't have meetings, and to everybody else in the room as well, please join us on the square for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. So I'm going to simply move it. So all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We're sort of in the process. That's fine. Members, we're going to basically adjourn the meeting. However, I'd like and invite members of the committee and members of staff to please stay in the room. If I can ask the other members of the public if you could leave the room, I'd appreciate it. So, members, the meeting is adjourned. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so the meeting's adjourned. Councillor, so if I can just ask the members of the public to leave the room, and staff and members of the committee to stay, please.